Hi, and welcome to the Blitz Online edition. I'm Josh. With me is Fong and Colin. We got another rainy day outside. We had another rainy weekend this past weekend. More lightning, more fun. More games getting pushed to Saturday.
Let's hope that the rain all is cleared out. It can rain today, it can rain tomorrow, it can rain the next day, but let's hope by Friday that it's all taken care of.
Well, and Troy was one of the teams that was back early. We've got some separation now up at the top of the CCC. We got everybody else starting league play now. This is where the season gets interesting, second half of the year, guys.
This is what all the coaches are really focused on. I mean, there are some coaches who talk about the playoffs, but they all say, before you win the playoffs, you got to win the league. If you can't win the league, chances are you're probably not going to the playoffs anyway. So this is really what I think all the coaches in Miami County are really focused and honed in on, is doing as well as they can in the league.
We're going to start with Miamisburg at Troy, or Troy at Miamisburg, rather.
That was a long drive. Trust me, it was definitely Troy at Miamisburg. So it was a long drive, 2 days in a row.
And the first thing in the morning, the next day also, and Troy, another's just on the verge.
I don't know how many more ways they can lose and how many more different ways they can lose heartbreakers, but they found just about every way to do it. And I really honestly think that the delay actually hurt Troy. Troy's philosophy all season long has been, we're going to wear teams down. You know, we're not a big play offensive team. We just need to ground and pound and wear teams down and out-condition them. And then in the third and fourth quarters, when we're fresher, that's when we make our move. And with a whole night's rest in between halves, Troy didn't get that opportunity. So, not to make excuses, because Miamisburg played extremely well, but I certainly don't think that helped Troy.
Yeah, I think Troy's got some winnable games left on the schedule, and they still have a chance to do something late in the season. Fong, I got a question for you. Do you think a hypothetical win over Troutwood and winning out could put Troy in the playoffs?
I think playoffs right now are the furthest thing from anybody's mind in Troy, and if they're not going to talk about it, I'm not going to talk about it. And like I said, the way Troy's playing right now, they've got to beat Sydney, and if they don't beat Sydney, then everything else is a moot point.
Nobody likes hypotheticals when it comes to a 2-3 record.
Yeah, that's the least of their concerns right now is the playoffs.
Now, is it fair even though to say that Troy is in trouble with the 2-3 record? Because I mean they're coming off of their first coaching change in more than 2 decades and a half,
right?
And all these they lost so many starters from last year. I mean,
right?
You talked earlier in the season about how they still had expectations, but I mean. Right. Is it really fair?
Yeah, I don't know that it necessarily is. I mean, they've got so much new going on. Like I said, I think they need to take baby steps, and they really need to focus week by week. And first they've got to beat Sydney, and then they've got to worry about, and then they've got to play Butler, and then they've got to play Trotwood and see where the rest of the season goes. But I think most experts, if you were to look at it, said it would have been a tough road to hoe for Troy to make the playoffs, given all the adversity they were facing going into the season.
And we'll move from a team that needs to take baby steps to a team that is just walking over people. We go to Tip, and they went to Ben Logan. They only got the opening kickoff off on Friday night, and it didn't matter the next morning. 50-6 win. You were out at their practice this week talking to Cam Johnson. Tell me a little bit about Tip and his towel.
They're good. They're the real deal. There's no way denying that. What they're doing this year, their defense is just remarkable. Their offense, phenomenal, and they should go 10-0 and coast into the playoffs.
Tip is one team you can talk about the playoffs right now, because they are a playoff-ready team right this second.
Remember, you heard it here first. Tip is good.
Yes.
And we'll move over to Milton Union. They kicked off their SWBL Buckeye play last week with Madison. It was a 7-7 game when they left off on Friday night, and then Milton, ever since that Tip loss, they've just been angry. And 47-20 here this time around. Their defense is playing well, their offense is moving the ball, and they're not making mistakes.
They're playing well in all phases of the game right now, obviously. I mean, I would worry a little bit. So it seems like the last 2 weeks have gotten off to a slow start, but a slow start doesn't matter when you put together 4 or 5 touchdowns in the second, third, and fourth quarters.
Yeah, it seems kind of like early in some of those games, teams are trying to score with Milton, and then it's just not working over the rest of the game. Milton seemed to turn it on late, and their defense kind of takes over.
And then we've got last week's game of the week, Miami East hosting Bethel in the CCC, a couple of county teams, and Miami East, they're keeping pace with Covington right now. They're both unbeaten in the CCC. East wins that game 28-0, but Bethel still looks pretty good. Bethel, they hung with Tri-County North the week before, but Miami East has Covington this week, and
I think Bethel is a team who, if you are in the CCC, you wanted to play Bethel early in the season as opposed to later in the season. Because the longer the season goes on, the better that Bethel is going to get. I mean, their coaching is just too good, and they're going to improve from week to week. So I think teams that caught them early are going to have a much easier time with them than teams that catch them late. And I think you saw a little bit of that with Miami East, because I think with Miami East's record and Bethel's record, some people may have expected to be, a more lopsided game. But like I said, Bethel is going to get better, and by the end of the season, going into next season, I think they're going to be a much better team than they were at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I think defensively Bethel can hang with most teams in the CCC. Maybe not the Covingtons, but most teams in the CCC. I think you saw it last weekend. However, it's their offense. The teams they've played first part of the schedule have been brutal. I mean, it's tough to keep pace with Covington, Bradford, and the Tri-County Norths, but I think the next 5 or 6 games for Bethel, they have some very beatable teams, and I think we're going to see Bethel get some wins.
Bethel is coaching staff instituted those new systems on offense and defense, like these guys said. And, those kids are picking up on it. You can tell they're picking up on it. They're getting closer to these teams that are at the top, and now they're going to get teams that are kind of in the middle and at the bottom. So I think Bethel's going to finish this season strong. I think East is coming up on its biggest game of the season this week.
I don't think there's any question about that.
I feel it. I feel the pressure already.
And speaking of Covington, they cruised over Tri-County North 48-14. Tri-County North's got 2 league losses now. Covington's still unbeaten. They got some separation there. We kind of found out. Covington just proves itself more and more every week.
Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about this later in the show, but I think this is the game at the beginning of the season that everybody was looking at: Covington versus Miami East for the league champion. Tri-County North maybe made some noise early in the season. It seemed like maybe they could have a chance to factor into things, but I think Covington proved last week Tri-County North will not be a factor in the race for the cross-county conference championship.
I'll be honest, I wasn't surprised by this, considering what they did against Bradford the week before when we all thought it was going to be a game. But yeah, this is the game for Covington. It's going to be the toughest test, hands down, and I think they're going to come away with a win.
Speaking of Bradford, they've got to be one of Miami East's biggest fans right now. If Miami East beats Covington, they take over the lead, but that puts Bradford in a tie for second. So, I think Bradford's going to be tied for second no matter what happens. But if somebody else can sneak in and get East, which I think is possibly more likely than someone sneaking up on Covington,
right,
then that's really Bradford's only shot. They manhandled Ansonia again this past weekend.
And that was nice to see Bradford show that they can come back from a tough loss to Covington. I know that there's a lot of emotion. There was a lot of hype going into that game, and honestly, Bradford just came in and didn't do very well. And not because they didn't lack of effort or they didn't play well. Covington's really just that good, and Covington's going to do that to a lot of teams they play this year. Potentially every team they play this year. So it's nice to see Bradford's able to put that behind them and move on.
Yeah, and the good thing about Bradford now, they're in the playoff picture. They are in the thick of things. And they basically control their own destiny. They got Tri-County North this week, and I believe Miami East is coming up in a week or two. So that's going to be what they have to look forward to. They got a realistic shot of making the playoffs this year.
And then just a couple of quickies to end. Springboro 55, Piqua 0. This was 34-0 whenever it got rained out, and then bumped to the next day.
Never in my life thought I'd see anybody do that to Piqua. Even when Piqua's teams that struggle, usually they can at least hold teams in check. I never thought I'd live to see a day where a team would do that to Piqua. Springboro's obviously very good. They beat Centerville. They're undefeated. I still never thought I'd see anybody do that to Piqua, especially so long as Bill Neese was there.
I think that's probably more of a testament to just how good that Springboro team is than it doesn't really reflect on Piqua at all.
Absolutely.
And then another blowout, Lehman beating Riverside 44-0, and Lehman's defense was the story of that one.
I have never seen this before, maybe once or twice, but Lehman did not allow a first down to Riverside. How often does that happen?
I've never seen it before, and I've been doing this a long time.
Only time I can maybe think of it is maybe like a Covington team did it way back when, but
Right.
I can't remember that day. That's impressive.
All right. That'll lead us up into this week's segment. We've got Colin talking about Cameron Johnson from Tip, the big play guy from the Red Devils.
Cameron Johnson just adds another element to Tip's offense. He's basically the game breaker for Tip. The thing you have to look at when you look at his stat line, 14.1 yards a carry, and he's already carried it over close to at least 60 times this year. 14.1 yards. So he is the game breaker, game changer for Tippecanoe, and that's why he's our cover story this week.
I think, going into the offseason, we had a lot of returning starters from last year. And, those 2 losses definitely, pushed us to work harder in the offseason. I think we're more prepared this year as a team. Fisher usually run on the outside a little bit, and then Hall, he's massive. He likes to bust up in the middle.
He does a nice job of cutting things back, and he also works at using his blockers in the open field. And he's a kid that you got to kind of worry about back there. If you try to focus in on Hall, that's another thing that brings to the table. If you focus in on Hall, then Cameron's capable of popping one. So
all that credit goes to the big line. You got Hunter, Daniels, Para, Gatchel, Banks, and Cox and Walker. They did everybody does yards just as I do.
You're a 3-sport star, man. Now, do you ever get tired? Do you ever want to just
no. I love sports. This is what I want to do.
All right, now let's get into the Week 6 games. We've got Troy hosting Sydney in a GWalk North matchup. Opener for both teams. 2-3 records both, or
Sydney's 3-2, Troy's 2-3. Obviously, Sydney's probably one of the nicest stories of the year. The fact that they had gone 0-20 the previous 2 seasons and then come back this year and are already 3-2, which is as many games as they've won in the last 3 seasons combined. However, I assure you none of that means anything to Troy, and they don't want this nice story to get even nicer. With Troy, the one thing that we've come to expect this season is you just don't know what to expect. This isn't the Sydney team where they can just roll out the footballs and roll up 50 points, and I do think they have to be ready to play.
Yeah, I think Troy can come away with a win this week. Sydney's a team that, like you said, is a very good story, 3-2 record, but I remember what Troy did to them last year. Granted, they're not the same teams they are last year, but based on strength of schedule and what both teams have done against it, I think I got to give the edge to Troy in this one.
This Sydney might be a nice story, but I think Troy is sick of seeing the same story with it, and I think they're going to leave a little bit less doubt at the end of the game.
I think they've got to. I think they can't afford to let it come down to a last play or 2 of the game.
And then we've got Bellefontaine traveling to Tippecanoe for the for the opening in CBC Kenton Trail play. 1-3 Bellefontaine, 5-0 Tip.
Call the fire department. This is going to get out of control.
This one won't come down to the last play of the game. With Troy it could, but with this will not come down to the last play of the game, I assure you.
This will come down to maybe the 7th or 8th play of the first quarter.
Entirely possible.
Or the 4-minute mark, one of the 2.
We've got another big game. We've got Milton Union going to Carlisle. This could potentially be the SWBL Buckeye title game already. Brett Pierce certainly thinks so.
I think so as well. I think these are the 2 best teams in the league right now. And I tell you what, I think going back to that Milton Tippecanoe game, I think that playing in that big game and that atmosphere is going to help Milton Union because it's going to be another big game and another big atmosphere and another tough. And I think this time it works out for Milton Union where it didn't at Tippecanoe.
Yeah, I think Milton is very capable of winning this football game. Carlisle has been kind of rolling since they won their opening week or lost their opening week game to Franklin, but I think Milton has been playing too tough. Their offense, if it turns into a shootout, I think their defense is going to be able to get it done, and I think their offense will be able to put enough points on the board. So I think Milton escapes the win here. It'll be close.
And most of these Milton kids have got big game experience from last year also, playing Waynesville twice, on the road, once in the playoffs. And I just think that, Carlisle's got a lot of kids back too. That's why Pierce was looking at this game. But I think Milton's got more experience when it counts. And I think they can pull out this one.
Absolutely.
We've got to start disagreeing some guys. I think that's what's hurting our ratings.
Most of the games are pretty much like locks, I feel like sometimes. But
sometimes. This one...
There are better games on the deck for this week, though.
I've got a feeling we're all going to agree on this one, too, but this could go either way. Miami East at Covington, this is our game of the week, and... the at Covington, that might be the X factor in this game, or just Covington I think is too good personally.
Yeah,
I've seen them and their defense is scary.
I think Miami East will be ready, and I think Miami East will give it a valiant effort. But there's been nothing that we've seen from Covington to not pick them this week. They've really shown absolutely no weaknesses that I can see from week to week. And I think I said Miami East will give it a valiant effort, but I think Covington just has too much firepower.
Yeah, I think Covington has proven to be too good this year. To beat them, you're gonna have to score with them, which most teams have not been able to do. And I think once the lights come on Friday, I think Covington's going to be able to get the job done against East. And I think they're going to beat them by maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns. Definitely it's going to be one of their best challenges of the year, but I still think they go undefeated until they get to playoffs.
And then we got one that I think is going to surprise some people: 3-2 Twin Valley South at 1-4 Bethel. And like we've talked about already, Bethel's going to surprise some teams here at the end, and I think this is going to be the start of that.
You think so? You think this is the shocker?
I think this is going to be where they start turning around and winning some games.
I think that's a very good possibility, but I'm still going to go with Twin Valley South.
I disagree with that. I think Bethel will win it. I think they'll win it handily. The defense. Okay, first off, Twin Valley South scored 22 against Miss Sonoma Valley this last week. I think Bethel's good enough to hang with that. I think Bethel's going to win 30-15.
He's going so far as to
Wow.
score. Look at that.
Wow.
I'm doing it.
Then we got another close one. We got Tri-County North going to Bradford. Preseason contender versus surprise contender, and I think James Cannon is going to be the difference in this game.
I absolutely agree. I don't, there's only been one team that's been able to stop him, and or at least slow him down, and that's Covington. And Tri-County North may be a good team. They ain't Covington.
And I think Tri-County North's defense got exposed last week against Covington, and I think Cannon's going to be able to expose it again this week. I think Bradford's going to walk all over them, and I think the score, I'm not going to predict the score, I'll say Bradford.
Then we got defending state champion in Division II Trotwood going to Piqua, where, everyone's going to look at that Springboro score and be like, oh, Trotwood's going to walk over them. I remember last year Piqua gave Trotwood a game. Piqua always seems to give Trotwood a game.
I think Bill Neese knows some things about the Piqua offense and is able to do some things, and you're right. Last year was actually probably the closest game Trotwood played was against Piqua all season long. I mean, even closer than the state championship. They blew out the team they were playing in the state championship game. They needed a last-second comeback and some, depending on who you talk to, some questionable calls to beat Piqua. Still, though, I still think Trotwood Madison pulls this one out against Piqua. I think Piqua, it won't be 55-0, but I do think that Trotwood pulls it out.
Yeah. Still, you got to look at Piqua and say they have one of the best passing attacks in this area. But yeah, losing to Springboro last week like they did, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back from that. But I think Trotwood will be a big winner in this one.
Nah, I've got to agree. I mean, it'll be close. It'll be closer than people think, but Trotwood. They're on a roll after losing a couple to start the season, and I think they're just going to continue that. And we've got last game, Lehman going to Waynesfield Goshen. We have 2-3 Lehman versus 3 wins in a row for Waynesfield Goshen. Kind of a tough one to call. I'm going to go with the home team.
Maybe it's just because we don't see them as often as we see some of the other teams, but I don't know that we've ever gotten Lehman's prediction right, all 3 of us, all season long. There's always been. So you know what? They're playing well. I think the record is deceiving because of the quality of the competition they faced. I'm going with Lehman for now and reserving my right to change that when the picks actually come out in the paper and make it official.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lehman too. They're playing well. Their defense played well last week. First couple games of the season, yeah, it was rough for them, playing a bunch of playoff teams, but now they're starting to get some teams where they can beat, and I think they're going to win this game, and I think they're going to win it convincingly.
Oh, and if last week is any indicator, the NFL games will be the ones that decide where we come out in our picks.
The Browns. The Browns.
Coming from a Browns fan.
Yep.
Are you gonna guarantee that?
I'll guarantee they lose.
The
I'll
Ravens
guarantee
beat the
Ray
Browns.
Lewis sacks Brandon Wheaton about 10 times. But no, we will not win.
Did they put you on the roster this week?
They should have.
They could have.
I can kick.
All right, guys, that's it for this week. We'll see you again next week.
Bye.
I got no sign over.
Toodles.